honesty. Honesty, lunar, year annual, a new bird song, your lifeblood, blazing sun, moon, lion mane, sickle, quiet, waiting strings in a peg box. No angry dew.
This fragment should be understood as an excerpt from an ongoing, disorienting projection of poetry into video by Poetics. The projection of poetry, becoming disoriented, is video poetics, a poetics that takes the video of poetry. While it might appear to suggest an aphoristic, paratactic, or fragmentary style, we might more closely understand this style as like light diffused through water, stochastically scattering the distribution of photons. Thus, criticism takes on its properly uncritical stance in recognition of its semblance of orientation that at every point is imbricated in the disorientation of omnidirection. Video poetics, or video poetic criticism, is merely a refracted poetics that does nothing to poetics as such. This particular video emerges from a practice of video-based analysis and criticism of poetry developed over the course of several years. As a development, the work as a practice eventually emerged well enough to be discussed, and here presented.
Depths is a book about death.
I saw the death, the tree of knowledge.
But it is a death which speaks and reverberates and seems to echo forever.
One advantage of video criticism, especially video criticism of poetry, is that it might hallucinate for the viewer in the viewer the double oscillation between form and content. Made famous in Poetics by Charles Olson, quoting Robert Creeley in Projective Verse, form is never more than an extension of content. The oscillation of form and content is equally crucial for Theodore Adorno's aesthetic theory, wherein he insists on form as sedimented content being the formal foundation of art's autonomy. Like a particle collider, video poetic criticism slams together Creeley's notion of formal extension and Adorno's position of form as sedimented content in order to produce virtually infinite black holes of meaning and accidental worlds of signification. Video poetic criticism is the determinate negation of the poem in the service of poetics. I want to stress that determinate negation is but a floating cipher for the recognition of the non-identical horizon of poetics. Poetics, video poetic criticism suggests, is the non-identical aspect of poetry.
We are trying to figure out how to talk about tomatoes.
An epistemology of the word.
Yes.
Because it's about what we know and what we say in and around tomatoes, but in language.
No credit is ever given. The word is taken and put into a new culture, and it wasn't a friendly cultural exchange.
Right. I suppose in that transference through languages, we also have the story of hundreds of years of language subordination.
Oda al tomate. La calle está llena de tomates, mediodía, y la totalidad de su frescura.
The tomato seller sells large tomatoes, small tomatoes, leaf tomatoes, thin tomatoes, sweet tomatoes, large serpent tomatoes, nipple-shaped tomatoes, serpent tomatoes. In the American Grain, William Carlos Williams writes, "History begins for us with murder and enslavement, not with discovery."
Rather than make any claim to methodologically explaining the poem, the video poetic critic approaches the poem barely armed and charged with an improvisatory spirit so that they can demonstrate the communion of reading, which is always a technical, social, and spiritual collaboration in the field of meaning. At the same time, video poetic criticism is the loss latent in all readings, the entropic foundation that reflects the poetic text's abundant meaning. This loss is a productive loss. It is what opens the possibility of meaning against the formal consequence of communication. Reading in reference to loss saturates video poetic criticism with the possibility of intervention. It is meaning as value. The idiosyncratic video poetic reading makes singular and linear what absolutely is not. It takes the projection of the absolutely general by the poem and re-renders a singularity from it, though a singularity stretched across the bounds of the poem's event horizon. The video poetic critic brings poetry to video in an effort to dramatize the escape of the poem from the reader's grasp and the critic's scrutiny. The measure of success of video criticism, therefore, is the extent to which a given piece of video poetic criticism posits the insufficiency of all poetic readings, while performing the drama of meaning production by technical means that foreground language's enormous endlessness, an enormity within which poetics searches. Particular points of departure in Duncan's poetry must be read not as bounded constituents of sovereign particular poems, like nation-states, but as anarcho-pacifistic emblems, semblances of pure relation, in the shared hope of new contextualizations. Bending the bow to release the arrow requires the body coming into being with the realization of the string as ratio, line, like a lyre, like a lyric that is pulled, read, to pluck to sing, pulled to fire the arrow charged with the power, music, and song of the poem. If passages casts light that unifies languages, it does so only flickeringly. And the flickering here is the flickering under the fire of a gigantic panic, the strange painting, A Forest Fire, by Piero di Cosimi. The result is a group of figures that appear autonomous or in small groups, and yet are co-constitutive in the grand collage of the event, the fire, the poem, the event of language. The first grid and the last grid contain identical words, though the rectangle is rotated, the horizontal and vertical shifted, the image reflected like a burning, turning horizon, disc, bloody. For the video poetic critic, remediation and multimediation threaten to overturn the basis of material understood as matter. It threatens the medium specificity of all poetic artifacts, especially those specially singular artifacts, such as Johanna Drucker's stochastic poetics. Video poetics challenges the necessary presence of the poetic object. Indeed, it reconfigures presence altogether in an attempt to reprogram the critic toward the escaping simultaneous.
Stochastic systems are non-deterministic. They emerge in nonlinear ways according to chance and contingency. Discovering the emergence of meaning out of language's field is the subject of stochastic poetics. A 2-year labor, each page took several trips through the letterpress to make its final impression. Indeed, among the distributions we've already noticed patternings, repetitions of shapes, lines of flight, motions, givings and taking, revealing meaning itself on the out of the outside of the mechanical formality used to produce it, a casting toward the general condition of formality that we merge with in the undetermined reading.
At every point, video poetic criticism threatens the viewer with an effective experience distinct from the material conditions of the poem, situation, and context of reading, publication, and the circulation of discourse. While this video argues for a particular version of video poetic criticism, I am not here to suggest that taking the video of language requires one to make videos per se. Rather, I suggest that the power of poetry, and especially recent poetry, self-consciously takes the video of language itself in order to demonstrate language as languaging, to use Walter Mignolo's term. Taking the video of language retroactively maps onto well-worn avant-garde strategies such as collage, negation, and indeterminacy, and projects from the video critic's projector an image of recent formal strategies in poetry such as interdisciplinarity, diffusion, the global non-local, appropriation, constraint, digital poetics, expanded fields, translingualism, documentary and performance, social media, and mediation. Video poetics means to self-consciously use the metaphorical recording device known as video, once lamented as the death of cinema, to poorly capture poetry's beyond, while surrounding the site of material encounter, asymptotically tending toward the complete situation of meaning's emergence. Video criticism claims to re-see the artwork under scrutiny or presentation, while proving and presenting language art as infernally bound to signification and context, a condition that yields to a tendency to disappear the artwork altogether. If the video critic causes the poem to vanish in the video, it is so that one understands that the poem wrests the participant from the world, creating the semblance of a distinction between the world and the poem, between the poem and the participant, between the meaning and the context, while the video negatively reflects this semblance structure of poetic unity, providing the critical experience of staring into the sun while listening to a volcanic eruption. The binding of the sighted and the sounded, however, are only stand-ins for the holistic approach video represents. This binding is only the grand illusion of the semblance structure of art's unity, a re-presentation of poetry, a re-presentation from which the poem always escapes, leaving behind a presentation as if it were a re-presentation. I see Brathwaite's Sycorax video style as an instantiation of Zhukovsky's An Objective. The Sycorax video style, its tripartite moniker, its collection of terms, and its material instantiation names a detailed apparatus with the explicit goal and effect of bringing the process of objectification, the phenomenological experience of experience, and the material history it is embedded in to the fore. Attaching the name Sycorax to video, a word etymologically emergent from sight and technically tied to the visual channel of an audio-visual system, Sycorax video names what is invisible, destroyed by subordination to the status of the inhuman. It names the creature whose being is violently unseen by history, by the computational apparatus, and by the discourse community of Anglo, poetry, and publishing. The phrase Sycorax video style is the poetic style of seeing the unseen mother of the present. When we read, see, and hear Brathwaite's Sycorax video style, it produces Zhukovsky's notion of the detail. We see our process of objectification, the absurdity of its retrofuturist, Afrofuturist aesthetic, its difficulty, its opacity, its refusal of transparency, and its legitimate challenge to the material publishing apparatus of the contemporary creates a diffuse, immanent, multimodal poetic detail, at once present and demanding our investigation, at once endlessly receding from view, fundamentally opaque, buried under the impossibility of retrieval, lost to the necropolitical present.